Hello and welcome to AFP. My name is Devang and Sean, and I'm joined by the usual suspects, David, Goss, and Sean K. On today's show, we chat Canada's prep for the World Cup and their midfield issues, U.S. soccer not in a good place, their goal-scoring issues examined, plus Atletico Ottawa being the first team to secure their CPL playoff spot, Mobile Bully doing the damn thing for York United, and as always, we open the mailbag, AskAFP. Gentlemen, for once, the timing gods have shined on us because we were able to watch games right before we recorded, which never happens.
No, it never does. And to add to that, in the process of just beginning this show, I know Sean hates when I do this, Spain has just defeated Portugal 1-0 in the 90th minute to jump Portugal in UEFA Nations League and take the top spot in Group 2. So shout out to Nick Andrade for suffering with all of us on this day, as every international soccer team sucks.
Oof. I'm glad. Also, it's as much as we love Nick, it's good to bring everyone into the suck with us as we gloss over some losses or some draws. That being said, it does feel like the World Cup is very close. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't have nerves, but I do have this weight of expectation now as we get so close to these games.
Oh yeah, it's extremely exciting. I think today's match really kicked in. There was something odd about the Qatar game that just didn't feel like a real match, but today it was just like, okay, here we go. Like real competition outside our federation. It just felt right. It felt like it's time to turn the page and really focus on the World Cup. Also, obviously, me opening sticker packs has also helped with that. But I'll spare you guys the details.
Happy Rosh Hashanah to Mr. DG. I hope you had a good celebration.
Yeah, Rosh Hashanah is a time of reflection. Think about all the places you've been, all the sins you've had last year, how you can be a better person. So it's a really good time to have the final international window to just think about where we've been the last 4 years, all the things we suck at, and what we can do to be better coming up in the next year. It's been a weird day. I think starting with the Canada game was weird because it was like a moral victory, which moved into the U.S. game, which was like an immoral tie. And it just has been like a bizarre, how do you wrap your head around this stuff? I agreed with Sean. Like I was stoked a few days ago, but I'm less stoked now.
It's fair. I also I understand the need to react and sometimes overreact, and I totally get it as a soccer fan. That being said, it has made me feel a lot better about where Canada stands after watching the United States the last couple of days. So thank you to the United States, David.
That's what we're here for. That's what happens when you're a giant. A gigante.
Oh, come on.
I want to take this time as well to welcome new producer of the show, Zach Bensler. Will be helping us out. Big welcome to you, Zach, and can't wait for this to start.
Yes, Devang, our AFP family continues to grow. We can mock Nick Andrade. Sean K came back to us, which I think has been one of the he's the Richie Larea of our AFP family. We thought we were done with him.
He did his Nottingham Forest thing. He did his Steve Cooper sojourn.
Right. But we are excited to have the Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy of our show, which is Zach, be a part of it now.
I was expecting Zach to chime in on this broadcast, and then I realized that the way we record did not make that possible. That being said, big welcome to Zach. Really happy to have you. Really happy to grow this AFP family, like David said. And I want to mention, before we get to today's episode, a big shout out to everyone that is a Patreon, especially on days like today. I think our Patreon really shines through and through, and watching games from all over the world and trying to figure out how to watch these games is one of those journeys that I really enjoy with our Patreon crew, David.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been, tough watching friendlies of Iran, Uruguay in empty stadiums while half this, broadcast is beauty shots of the stadium because the feed went out. And so it's been nice to have everyone else know that there are other people doing the same ridiculous thing as you. That's been really nice.
You're definitely not alone. And if you want to join more people like yourself, head on over to patreon.com/football podcast. You get the show early on Tuesdays when we record. You get it ad-free. Plus, like we mentioned, you get access to the Discord where we're chatting footy all the time. When we come back after the break, those international friendlies, Canada, the US, where they stand, we talk about it next. Welcome back to AFP. Well, Canada actually scheduled some friendlies and played them. So I think that should be something that we should applaud in general. But after 2 games, a win over Qatar, a loss to Uruguay, we sit where we started, sort of. I think we had some questions about what they do in the midfield, with Atiba probably not being available in November, and some questions were asked, and we got some answers. But top line, where do you walk away from this if you're a Canadian soccer fan, Sean?
I think you walk away not happy, but I it's one of these things where I left feeling like the job was done. And this is in a weird way because, like, obviously you lost and obviously there were some issues, but having these issues sort of signaled at this point with months to go, and they weren't like catastrophic issues. They were just making sure you clean up mistakes, make sure that when there is a team that is so aggressive on the counter that you're prepared for it and you don't lose the ball in the midfield on stupid possessions, and continue to find ways to break down a team when they sit back on you, which is Canada's going to have trouble. But it sets, once again, somebody like John Herdman up to find ways and game plan. And he's always been somebody who game plans over and over and over and over again. So it gives him a lot of tape to look at. Whereas before, when you're playing CONCACAF or playing lesser opponents like the United States, it's not the same. It's just, you're just not getting the same caliber when you would get an attack that Uruguay possesses. So overall, I don't know, maybe I've got rose-colored glasses on, David, but you watched the match. What did you think? Did you think this was a good preparation match and put a lot of light on a few things that Canada needs to work on?
I'd argue you have rouge-colored glasses on. Nailed it.
Well done.
Devang, that's French.
Well done.
For you.
It was really good. No, you killed it. I'm tearing up. I'm tearing up just on how good that was.
I'm getting smack talked by a guy whose team started Sam Piet twice in a week, so I'm starting to feel a little animosity here. I would say I agree with you overall, Sean. And this, I think someone put this in the Discord, but Michael Singh tweeting out something that John Herdman said to One Soccer. I don't know if it was on broadcast or not. I didn't get that part of the game down here. And he said, most of the game I'm happy with coming out of today's game. When you look, there's not a massive gap to close here. John Herdman has spent 3 months talking about the massive gap. So in 2 games, the coach himself has gone from there's a massive gap for us to make up to there's literally not. And I think that's sort of how all of us, or it sounds like me and Sean at least, have walked away from this window, similar to Herdman saying they're in the ballpark. They can play with these teams. They can play their game. Whether they will win, whether they'll get the results to get out of the group, that I'm not sure of, but they are in the ballpark, and we weren't sure of that a week ago, and I think that's pretty positive.
I think I'm with you guys, and I think the frailties that we acknowledged are present on this team. You could see how a team like Uruguay or a Belgium or a Croatia could exploit them, and I think this match was a great, I think, preview of what they can expect. And if Alistair Johnston doesn't make that mistake and now man marks properly or gets in position properly, that's a win, right? And I think that's the whole reason you play these games. But it was interesting to me, like the Qatar game, I'm not sure if that was Qatar's first team, but it didn't seem like they were remotely close in quality. And I was a bit surprised by that, but I was waiting for Uruguay because I think it was the biggest sign of what is to come in terms of the World Cup. And there's levels to this. Like, I think Uruguay is a top 10 team in the world. And the fact that they took the game to them in the second half, sure, it means something, but also it was 2-0 and it's a friendly. So like, how much can you really draw on that?
It's tough. And one of the things that's tough is the way Uruguay plays, right? They sit off you, they give you the ball. So like the U.S. hosted Uruguay in June and we outplayed them. Do you really outplay Uruguay though if you don't beat them? Probably not. Like that's just who they are. Right. And they had some injuries, right? They're missing Cavani. They're missing the two center backs, arguably one of the best in the world. They're missing some options in center mid, Araujo. So I think there's like a lot of nuance there, which is tough to take. It being that Canada dominated possession against a team that I think is a World Cup favorite or a World Cup winning contender, but also that's their game model. So those things I think are tough to figure out what's where, but you can't walk away from the fact that like in 50-50s and ideas and in handling the pressure, that Canada looked at least on the level with Uruguay, and the guys I think who have never played at that level before, because that was the big thing for me going into this game. It's like Steven Vitória plays in Portugal week in and week out. Alphonso Davies plays in Champions League. Eustáquio started for Porto. It was Alistair Johnston and Kamal Miller and Adekube to an extent, and obviously Piet then in the end, where I was like, okay, can they scale their game to this level? And I thought Kamal Miller really struggled at the beginning. You see it in the free kick given away. You see it in Suarez picking up that space. I thought he got better as the game went along. I thought Alistair Johnston played like himself as the game went along. Like he came out, sort of got hit in the face with, holy crap, these guys are good. But then by the end, he's closing on 50-50s. He's reading the game quicker. He's making the underlapping run, which he did against Qatar, which has been, I think, going to be a big part of this team because of the way he plays for Montreal. All of that sort of grew, and I walk away from it saying like, okay, the key essential pieces figured it out, and this was a game to figure it out in because it doesn't count, where the World Cup is where you want to know what you're doing.
I love that Richie immediately went after Luis Suarez and just basically owned that he is. I thought that was fantastic. I mean, so in terms of like narrowing it down in the Canada conversation, we had a lot of questions about what do they do in the midfield and who plays beside Stefan Eustáquio, who I think was really good again, and that he's so smart on the ball and he has a vision for the game. You can clearly tell that him and Fonzie see the game the same way, which is a really promising sign, I think, going forward for Canada. But who plays beside him? And like, what do they do going forward? I thought outside of how well they played in the second half, Ismail Kone's performance as well is one of those things to me that bookmark this, because I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up playing some big minutes in November.
He's a wild card to me. And he's a wild card in that sometimes that's exactly what you're looking for in a game when it's going against you, right? You need to change things when the game is not the state you want it to be, whether you're struggling to create, whether you're getting, a ton of pressure. But in this week, he also showed me that he can be solid in big moments and that it's not just the pop up and make something crazy happen because you're an elite talent and you're special on the ball and you're an unbelievable athlete and you read the game. He showed that he could be a center mid. So I agree with you. I feel better about him a week ago. And I think I said it on this show, like he's a must on a roster because you need match winners and he's capable of that, but I wouldn't trust him in big moments. I feel better about him now. And I think I feel better about Sam Piet as well. And I know that's ridiculous to say. The guy's been around for 500 years doing it, but this is the next level. And I think the team was worse off with him on the field than they would have been with Atiba or Oso specifically in these two games, specifically against Uruguay. Like I think Eustáquio didn't play his best game. Yeah, exactly.
But that's I feel like if Oso was beside Eustáquio, that would have been quite perfect.
Yeah. He would have been the late runner you needed. He tries to get out of tight spaces. He takes risks. I think Atiba, imagine Sam Piet dropped deep a lot in this game, sort of pulled strings around Vitória. Imagine that's Atiba. Like that, those two would have been game changers. Obviously, if they're out, you need someone else to play in there. I think Piet showed that he's not going to help win you the game, and I think he makes life harder for Eustáquio and life harder for Alphonso Davies, but he's not going to lose you the game either.
Can we touch on that sort of Oso note that you guys were just talking about? There's just something that I watched in the game, and it's something that it's probably going to come up a few times because of how good midfields are, especially in Belgium and Croatia. Who is going to be that attacking midfielder that's going to be able to unlock centrally? Because obviously Tejan, Davies, Larin, like they all play through the wings. And when the wings aren't working and you're playing centrally, is Oso good enough? And I love Oso. Is Oso good enough to unlock a Belgium backline or a Croatian backline through a nice through ball to David? Do you think he is?
Well, hear me out, because I think Tejan coming back and playing and returning to fitness is the answer here, because it seemed like Fonzie was playing as a 10 for a bunch of this game, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the answer of getting someone who is your best player as many touches on the ball as possible.
And I think John Herdman thinks that because he's played him there twice. I did a show with Patrice Bernier during the game, and Patrice brought it up, and I think we talked about it a lot at the beginning of qualifying. We've moved away from it, but I actually wonder whether it's not best to just start Davies at wingback because he's comfortable there and he gets his runway and you can just play through him. But either way, I understand your question, Sean. I just don't think that's the way the games are going to play. And so what Osorio does well, being the late runner, being a second forward, beating guys in tight spaces, keeping the ball moving when it comes across from one wing to another. I think all of that is probably enough, because you also can't have a passenger at the 10, and he's going to work hard to be a center mid and press and cover. And I actually would argue he unlocks Eustachio, because if he's your quote unquote 10 with Atiba as your 6, Eustachio can go. Like Eustachio can go and sort of be an attacking player because Osorio does enough work defensively to sort of make up for that. And I think you saw that in the Azteca, right? Where it was like, it wasn't a need for him to drop deep and start pulling teams apart with the pass. It was go and always be an option for both wingers and both wingbacks. And that was sort of what opened the team up and led to his goal, which I would argue in this Uruguay game probably would have been enough to open up David, Larin, and Davies.
We've got one final game before the World Cup begins against Japan in Dubai on November 17th,
which is huge, by the way. It's such a good idea to have set that up, and you have the extra week, you might as well do it.
A really good Japan team too, who I think is a perfect team to play before a big tournament. But I wondered, posing this to you guys, has your outlook on Canada changed after these two games? I think that we kind of netted out where we started, where the same questions we had, we still have them. I think the fact that Kyle Larin isn't playing big minutes for his club kind of showed against Uruguay. I'm concerned about that. Maybe I was less so after Qatar, but I'm curious what you guys think.
I think I came into the meeting last week and asked you guys, like, should we be panicked? And was trying to sound the alarm because Atiba was out and Oso was out and Mark Anthony Kaye's not playing. And I would say I think I feel a little bit better than I did last Tuesday, but I don't feel differently than I did upon the draw or qualification. So I think I would agree with you that I sort of end up in a similar space, which is when they're on, they could shock people. And this team's good enough to get out of the group, but they're not favorites to do it.
Yeah, I agree with the group. I think I netted at the same spot. Like, it's nice to see that we can hang with some of the best teams in the world, but still, it's a loss. It was 2-0 and some mistakes that I expect similar mistakes to happen in the World Cup. I think there's just too many bright lights and not enough experience. And there are things that I was kind of disappointed up front. Larin's first touch, and I wrote this in the notes, it really sort of showed the difference between a Jonathan David and a Kyle Larin. And no disrespect to Kyle, like, he's found himself a really good spot, but that is always been something that sort of let him down, is that he's got to wait to let it go. And it seemed like he was a step off on almost everything that he got today. And it does concern me against, once again, the high caliber teams. The guy is a fox in the box and find ways to score goals. But I just think in moments where you're going to have one or two opportunities and it might be 16 yards out on an angle, you need to hit it first time and you can't take the second one. I don't know if this is me just being too reactionary, but it's similar to like that Jassy Zardes narrative that was a few years ago, where it's like, he's good, he can score goals, but he's just not like at that level at the international stage.
I mean, I think the question is he a match winner? I don't think so. Probably. I think it is your Jonathan Davids. It's your Alphonso Davies.
But he was against Mexico, right?
Yeah.
He was against the U.S. Those are the two biggest games they play in qualifying. He was the match winner in those games.
And kind of the straw that stirs the drink in terms of what they do well going forward. So I feel like I think Kyle Aaron being a big factor is so important to this team, and maybe that's obvious, but with the talent they have up top and what they can kind of finesse with what John Hurden wants to do in terms of deploying these guys, that's to me one of the biggest questions. I think defensively, I have a lot of issues about going forward, and I'm a bit worried about what could happen against your Kevin De Bruyne's or your Luka Modric's, but that's sport. Shall we move on to the U.S. MNT?
No, I think we're good. Here.
So I am a fan of the USA in general, in a lot of ways. But the States, love the States. But I do think that the reaction to U.S. men's team games is maybe my favorite Schadenfreude-esque kind of moment where I get it and I understand where the vitriol is coming from, but I feel like these two games went as poorly as possible, DG. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this is what they were looking for in terms of this warm-up test.
No, I mean, if we'd lost to Saudi Arabia, would have been worse. But yeah, in terms of what we saw, it was a team. I think the term Greg Berhalter used after the Japan friendly, which I thought was very fitting, is personality. They showed no personality of how to solve problems, of how to change issues, of how to shift momentum of game, on top of a lack of quality or sharpness. So I think it's really a big letdown that your last window after the World Cup, there was no intensity from the players, like that any of it mattered, and trying to take advantage of what it was. And then there's a sort of stark realization of your quality, which is, you can't show up against Saudi Arabia at 70, 75% and get a win. You're not good enough, which maybe, Germany's good enough to do that. Maybe Portugal's good enough to do that. We're not. So I think you kind of have all those realizations at the same time. It is pretty tough and it's pretty stark. And, there's some of those things I think I could talk out of. Weston McKennie's a guy who elevates his game in the biggest moments. This was a friendly against Saudi Arabia in an empty stadium in Spain. Those are not the biggest moments. And there is not really that level of intensity and pressure, which you could say they should be good enough. Okay, well, that's fine. That's all, should be is irrelevant. The World Cup won't be that. So there's some things that I'm sort of like, I can ignore, but now there's no way to say, oh, well, there's another way to prove that it'll be better at the World Cup. Like, we're all just hoping and wishing that it will be.
On a positive note, the rest of your group at the World Cup doesn't seem like they're doing that well either. I mean, Wales and England both got relegated to the Nations League. I think I would want to play England extremely hard if I was any team in the world right now, based on how they're doing.
I do wish we were playing them first. I just think it's the way you want it set up, of like, they're coming, they're a little unsure. Oh, we'll be here long term. Like, if you remember 2018 World Cup, most of the top teams played poorly or got bad results in their first game. It was their worst game there. And so it's great for Canada that they get to play Belgium right off the bat. But I do wish we were playing England first.
Question for you guys, just to get into that. It's just really bizarre that, like, last summer, we were talking about England and Italy as being like the elite teams in Europe. And now here we are. England's a joke and Italy's not in the World Cup. Why do you think that that's the case? Do you think it was just two hot teams running hot, or what has happened over there?
I think a few things. I think one, tournament soccer is misleading. I think two, they were both home teams, and like people chose to ignore that as much as they wanted. But England played every game in England, and Italy played 4 of their 6 games in Italy, which enough. I don't think is irrelevant. And then I would say momentum matters a lot for these teams because with COVID, they're meeting so irregularly and the schedule with the World Cup is so odd that momentum matters a lot in terms of belief in these teams because there's not much to fall back on of experience. Like, oh, this group's been together for 7 years in battles and wars and like whatever happens, they'll perform. It's like, nah, all these guys kind of just met. And if it goes wrong, now all of a sudden everyone's down on each other. Yeah. So I think that's all a factor. I would say Italy was definitely a bit of a mirage that they played great soccer and had that home field advantage for a program that is falling apart, but they still should have beaten North Macedonia. So they should be closer to this World Cup than they ended up.
Fair enough.
Following these games, I think I'm still more confident in the U.S. getting out of their group than Canada.
Yeah, because the group's bad. Yeah, that's the right take.
Yeah.
Wales is bad. Like, Scotland would have been a dream if they had ended up. Bad. If Scotland had qualified, I'd be just buying lotto tickets because I'd be like, how the hell did we get so lucky that we got a draw like that? That team's awful. Wales is bad, but they are set up to win against teams that are better than them. And right now, Bale looks bad and Ramsey was hurt. So we didn't see it that much against Belgium. I mean, they got mauled in the first half by Belgium. It was a miracle. It was only 2-0. Then Kiefer Moore scores a goal, right? Like they kind of have that in their team out of nowhere. If Daniel James could finish, he'd be a world-class player, right? Like that's sort of who he is. But what if he accidentally finishes in the one game you play him? Like then you're screwed because the guy's a monster and everything else he does. And they're set up pretty defensively. So yeah, Wales are bad, but they sort of know who they are going into that game. I mean, they've made it out of the group at all the Euros they've been to in the last 4 years.
I think Joe Rodon will play in this game, so you can chalk it up as a win for the United States, just to get my Spurs hatred out of the way.
But Devang, hold on. Yeah. Whoa. There was one thing.
I believe it's Rennes, by the way. I believe it's Rennes.
There was one thing off the top, though, that I wanted to let you know, because you were talking about how joyous it was to sort of watch post-match U.S. men's national team because it's sort of exploding. That's how I feel and most people feel after watching Arsenal TV. Like those guys is basically so you're looking in the mirror. I'm just letting you know.
I bear no false illusion. I know what I am, and it sickens me, Sean. So don't worry.
Man, dude, we get Zach on this show for 1 week, and all of a sudden the claws come out.
Big game this weekend. Anyways,
I will. Let me just say this about the U.S. before we move on, which is, and I think I've been pretty consistent on this for 3 to 4 years now in saying this is the youngest team in the world. There are very few veterans in major positions for players to lean on. And this is the reality of that team. And everyone wants to turn and say, well, Barcelona, Chelsea, Leeds United, Leipzig, there's big teams. Yeah, great. None of them are the leaders on their teams. None of them, the teams are built around. And so this is sort of what it's going to be like. The question is, are they talented enough for it to not matter? Can Greg Berhalter get them to play dumb and confident because they don't know better rather than lost? And there is going to be a ton of pressure on Greg Berhalter. I mean, in reality, Jesse Marsch's game model is the way this team should play. Almost every player at their best is at front foot forward, athletic, read the game, close things down, and play in transition. Greg Berhalter believes the game should be played with the ball and controlled. He has shifted on some of those ideas since he's been coached. I think that's what he means when he talks about intensity a lot, is physicality, grit, aggression, which other coaches talk about using multiple terms because it's a bigger part of their game model. Greg Berhalter just uses the term intensity, and he'll use it over and over again. But I think that's where he has started to lean on that. And so there's going to be a pretty big microscope on him when this tournament comes through, and it's going to be even bigger if Jordan Pefok's scoring goals, he doesn't bring him, all things like that. But the reality of it is I don't know that this talent set up best to succeed, and I think that's okay. We're not going to win this World Cup anyway, and he got the team there, which was the number one goal, and he accomplished it, and he won 2 trophies last summer, which people love to forget, and beat Mexico twice in big games. So all of that is positive. But I think this week highlighted what I'd been saying for a while, which is when Landon Donovan and DeMarcus Beasley went to the World Cup and were stars, they played off of Claudio Reyna. They played off of John O'Brien. They played off of Brian McBride. All those guys were established, European stars or established stars, big time players, at least veterans. And that just doesn't exist right now.
Do you think Long and Zimmerman will be the pairing?
Yeah, I think so. Zimmerman's clearly a starter. And what people forget is Aaron Long was the starter and Miles Robinson was put into the team because he best, exemplified what Aaron Long brought. And then Miles Robinson got hurt and Aaron Long comes back in and everyone's like, he's looking for a Robinson replacement. No, he's replacing Aaron Long again for the second time after a long-term injury. So because of quote unquote intensity, right? High pressing, he trusts Aaron Long to defend over the top and his athleticism. I think Aaron Long's better on the ball than Walker Zimmerman, but he has looked petrified over the last 2 games to play out of the back, which is bizarre. And I will go back to how these players should be set up. I think you see it with Brendan Aronson. I think you see it with Weston McKennie. I think you see it with Tyler Adams. And you see it with Aaron Long. And they don't value possession in the same way. And when they're with the U.S., I think they're scared to make mistakes because they're not set up to win the ball back immediately. It's not how they're comfortable playing, and they're trying to figure it out.
As we famously do on AFP, we've gone too long, Sean. So I do want to say shout out to the Iranian national team for voicing their concerns about what's happening in their country by covering their logo during the anthem on Tuesday. I think that was massively impactful, SK. Apparently, the 2026 World Cup final is going to Dallas at AT&T Stadium, Jerry World, which is fitting and proper for the course.
It is way too fitting. It's too spot on. It's almost uncomfortable.
My favorite World Group headline is Lionel Messi saying that Thiago Almeida plays loose, which I know what he means, but I just love the fact that he said Thiago plays loose.
Yeah, it's pretty special. It's pretty wild. I want to specifically, by the way, shout out Sadr Azmoun, the center forward for Iran. He was the one who came out on Instagram yesterday first before the rest of the team and said, I don't care if I get cut. This is never coming down in support of women in Iran and the protests. So he put himself out there, which is scary and tough. He's done it a couple of times, sort of spoken out against a federation that doesn't allow that and a country. So, yeah.
Well, we'll leave it there. When we come back, Canadian Premier League, MLS news, a Ballou Tabla Golazzo that we will talk about endlessly coming up next.
Although, to be fair to the Cap supporters, they did a great job making the 3-hour trek to the provincial capital to see the final El Clasico of the season. Look at this from Ottawa! Are you kidding me? Ballou Tabla!
What a finish that was!
An overhead kick from outside the box, Jimmy. The audacity from Ballou. That is a statement goal very early in this match.
A phenomenal call from Adam Jenkins, and the audacity indeed. From Montreal to Barcelona to Ottawa, Ballou Tabla is making headlines again, and this time, I feel like this was a perfect moment in general for Atletico Ottawa in terms of what they've done this season. And yes, that prediction I made when we recorded our CPL preview, I was right, folks. So I would also just like to bask. I would just like to bask in that and receive your adulation for making that call correctly.
Woo! Congratulations, Devang. You did it.
You have poise, you have grace, you have everything else. He is Devang Desai, Mr. Called It for Ottawa 2022.
I do want to say, though, as well, I watched the Canada-Uruguay game with an Atletico Ottawa fan, and I was asking him about basically the season that was and where they've come from and who are the biggest drivers of this. But it's Ollie Bassett, who I think might win Player of the Year. I think he should be up in this consideration. But it's Ballou Tabla as well, Sean. And I think the story of his journey and where he's been and taking a an interesting route to say the least. It feels good to see him playing this well for a team that's top of the table.
Yeah, it's just it's nice to see somebody find themselves again, because obviously for the last few years he's really struggled to make any impact, no pun intended, any impact across whether it was Montreal or Barca B. You just sort of thought it was going to be one of those players that you remember at 18, but then sort of really disappeared and didn't end up being who they were. But he's found a really good home in Ottawa. He's allowed to play his game. And it's something that I really like about that I'm seeing more and more in the Canadian Premier League is that it's not just that they're coming in and they're given spots. They're given sort of the spot to shine, like a Ballou Tabla, or Momo Babuli. Like, these are guys that struggle being bit pieces in teams, and they need the focal point on them and run things through them. And I think that this is an opportunity for a lot of these players to really find themselves and then grow and become these sort of MVP caliber players. And it's tough when you're number 23 on an MLS roster trying to find that moment. But when you're the number 10 and you're getting the touches and you're getting the opportunities, it's great. And to see Tabla continue to grow. Once again, I think if he can run on a couple good years, he can once again then maybe make that step and get into an 11 and continue to grow his career. Because I don't think he's done yet, and I think that his spot in Ottawa is good. So a question for both of you guys, because a lot of people have been talking about like goal of the year, not just CPL, but like outside of this league. Was it that good? Am I underplaying it, or was this an elite level goal that if you saw it in the Croatian top division that you'd be like, oh, that was an incredible goal?
I mean, just personally for me, as someone who is a diehard of the Croatian top division, I just think if I was watching Zagreb start play, and I love that that's the league you went with. Sorry, I had to make fun of you for that. The idea is kind of absurd, right? Like when you watched it, the first time I watched it, it was less, you go like, oh, wow. But it was less the strike and more the like, who tries that? Who does that? And I think that audacity is like kind of one of those things we love about those behind midfield strikes where it's like, oh, why would you even look up and chip a goalkeeper at that point? I think that sort of is the part where like, yeah, it probably is in that combo, not just the pure like technique and finish. Because listen, if it was a clean bike where he like left his feet and hit it over his own head from that spot, yeah, it's the best goal we've ever seen. It wasn't exactly that. But that's sort of my takeaway.
I have it frozen on when he sees the ball and where he is, and it's absolutely outrageous. That is the first thought in his mind, and I think that's just a testament to how talented he is, or what was going through his thought process to even attempt that, because he, again, like Adam said, extremely audacious, but wonderful to see. Sean, you mentioned Mo Babuli.
Yeah.
What a fascinating story this is, because I wonder if this is home now, or if this is going to be the place for him to stick around for a while, because it doesn't seem like it'll be enough this late for York to get in the playoffs. But that being said, he's been an absolute game breaker, and I feel like York is honing in on not reclamation projects, but people who have a connection to the area and who could still obviously play.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see York transform. And obviously at the start of the season, they had some injury troubles and trying to figure out how this team was going to play. But since Babuli has come in and sort of been that North Star for the team and just the connecting point, it's been incredible. And like, if they could have secured this deal 2-3 games, we'd probably be talking with them.
They would have been in. Yeah.
They probably would be knocking on the door. Because they're 4 points back with 2 games to go. Pacific has 4 games left, so it's like they're not going to get in. But they're 5-1-1. They've beaten Forge, they've beaten Cavalry, they've beaten Valor, and then they've beaten Edmonton a few times. But like they're a completely different team than where they were a month and a half, 2 months ago. I was really worried about York United. I didn't think that they were ever going to turn the corner, and they were playing too many young kids. And just once again, one sort of mature leader in the locker room changed this club completely around. And now they're they got to figure out their attendance, but they'll figure that out soon.
And didn't D-Rose say, I think I saw an interview with him recently that he's basically alluded to coming back, like he had unfinished business, right?
Completely. That core, I think, is going to stick around for next year at least. So having those two key pieces is going to be excellent for York United.
Before we get to MLS, are you guys worried about Forge? I am a bit worried. I understand playing at a peak level for this long and being one of the vanguards of the league. It takes a lot out of you, but also on the road, so give them that as well. But I'm a bit concerned.
So you think they have the TFC fall off of like, you can only play that high level for so long.
Right.
I wonder this year without CONCACAF League, if they'll actually peak at the right time, which they weren't able to do in the last season, but they were the 2 years before. Obviously, the bubble was a bit different of like, yeah, they're not playing their best soccer today, but today's not when you want to be playing your best soccer.
And I think that's the hope, and it makes sense. And I mean, if you look around the league, I mean, Cavalry as well, not looking that great. So I think peaking at the right time is definitely still on the table, but I do wonder the core and kind of switching the key attacking players on the fly and having so many options ends up being maybe too much to decide on, but it would be foolish to bet against Bobby, I feel like, Sean.
Yeah, I it's tough, right? Because you look at their goal differential, the start of the season, they were so good. Like there's nobody in this league that has double-digit goal differential other than Forge, and they have 20, a plus 20 to their name. So you got to always respect that. But like you look at the run of games since the middle of August, a 2-1 loss, a 3-1 loss, a draw, a loss, a win, a draw, like, and then like watching the game on Sunday, it's crazy to say this because Edmonton is a dire franchise right now, and they looked the better team at that game. And I don't think you can say that many times this year, but Forge got a lucky goal to take the lead, but never once did I feel like Edmonton wasn't going to come back in that game. It was very unlike Forge, and I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I think Valor has sort of peaked a little too early. And I think has opened the door for Forge. And stranger things have happened. They've got a skill level that's above everyone, but it's not singing right now. And it'll be interesting, but I don't feel comfortable about Forge right now.
Neither do I. I cannot wait for the playoffs. I think it's going to be a very fascinating run-in, and we're not that far away. Obviously, beginning of October, we'll have the final few regular season games, and then we get into the playoffs, which should be outstanding. Let's go to MLS land. The LA Galaxy, our favorite team and yours, are now firmly in a playoff spot because they did what they had to do against San Jose on the road, even though they made it seem unneedlessly dicey by the end. But I wonder if our assessment on the Galaxy has taken a turn in the sense that we were confident they would get it together, and there's just too much talent on this team, and Greg Vanney's obviously a good coach, but were they running out of runway in the sense that a lot of ads during the season, a lot of poor results in games that they should have done better? But that being said, they look okay. David, is this too early to do a reverse referendum?
Yeah, it is, because Zlatan's second year, they lost to the Dynamo, who were out of the playoffs at home, to not make it in, and that's who they play on the final week. And last year, they drew Minnesota, who kind of had nothing to play for on the last day to not get in. So, yeah, their reality isn't different, and therefore, I'm not going to assess them differently until they actually clinch the spot, because as great as it was, as big a worry as this game was, because it was such a potential slip-up game of like, oh, we have a game in hand against San Jose. That's so easy. But it's Cali Classico. It's sold out Stanford Stadium. You've never won there twice in a row. Like, there was so many other elements that other teams wouldn't have had to deal with if they were playing San Jose during the international break in a game no one cared about. Just avoiding the slip-up doesn't make them anointed yet as like a potential team that can do things. So I have to see it again.
And I back that. And I also, Again, as a Western Conference hater, I can't respect any of these teams that exist over there. But
So, Devang, everyone else will know this before us. Big game tonight. FC Cincinnati against Seattle. If Seattle wins, it'll be the Western Conference, I think, will have a better record overall for the season than the East. And if FC Cincinnati wins, I think it's the opposite. So that's a big game for you.
it's a massive game. And I'll be living and dying with this result. Holy God. MLS News and Notes. Sean, we got some stuff happening.
We do. Number one, let's just talk about, because we were talking about the Galaxy, but it's come out that the Galaxy and LAFC are going to do the El Clasico at the Rose Bowl. How excited, how amped, how amped are you, David? Do you expect the DG train to take a trip to the Rose Bowl next year?
I have no idea, but I am excited. I think it's cool. This feels like the type of thing when, like, you know, they go and play the game at
They should double down. No, they should double down on this. They should double down on this for sure.
What does double down mean?
Like really dive into this rivalry and make it a big thing in the state of California as well.
Yeah, I agree. So, and that's what I'm saying. And I think when you think of like the Winter Classics and stuff, it's like, what can you do that's like a gimmick, but also cool, and not a gimmick, and then it's like, oh, this is such a gimmick. And this one feels cool to me. And the history that stadium has, hosting World Cup finals, men's and women's, the history that stadium has in the city and the sort of cultural resonance it has, all of that is really cool. And so I think this is going to be awesome. Is it a home game for one of the teams? Does someone lose an actual home game because of this?
I believe so. And I believe it would be the Galaxy.
I think it is the Galaxy, yeah.
By geographical proximity, yeah.
Which is crazy because my geography of LA is not very good because it's a trash city, but I think LAFC is closer to Pasadena than the Galaxy.
You're right. I'm glad someone called out LA though.
Do we expect 90,000 do we expect the Rose Bowl to sell out for this game?
So that feels like a lot, but
completely.
But this is definitely one of those games where the on-the-ground article from 20 years later is going to be like, we're handing out tickets to youth soccer teams. I'm in a van in West LA just throwing tickets at people. So, yeah, I assume they're going to do some things to make sure the building feels fairly full. I think selling it out is probably a bit of a stretch.
Really? I don't know why. And once again, this could be just good old I love MLS Sean coming out. But I have confidence that it will be a sellout, announced sellout. And it might just be just throwing tickets out, but I feel like it might it's one of those games, you got a long enough lead time. I think that both clubs will be, and like fan supporters groups will be like galvanized to like go out and be like, grab your grandmother, grab your friend you unfriended from Facebook. Just bring everybody to this moment, because I think that they're going to try to make it whatever, LA Black or whatever color the Galaxy you want to call themselves.
So let me just say, obviously, you being a Gareth Bale diehard, there's a little bit of lack of neutrality in this comment. But if you juice those two stadiums, right? I think Home Depot, where'd that almost come from? Whatever the hell it's called. The Galaxy is probably close to 30. Bank of California is probably closer to 25. You juice those, that puts you at 60. You want to say 65K? You're still like 50K away from selling that thing out. And so then you have, if they're still on contracts, you've got Vela and Chicharito. Now you're starting to push the same Mexican community that will come out and see Mexico literally just played there. Like those fans, okay. I wouldn't be shocked if you're floating around 90,000, but 90,000 can feel somewhat empty at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. The Poochies might be a big group. I think there's going to be a lot of
the Gaston Brugman fan clubs.
But yeah, it's true. That's a lot of people. Like when Toronto FC was trying to sell out the Skydome in 2012 and 2013, they even struggled to do that, and that was like I think pushing 50. So yeah, that's a lot. That's a city or like worth of people in one place. So we'll see. Another Tom Bogert basically came out and reported that Kai Wagner is 100% going to Europe. Do we all assume that it's going to be Leeds that's going to be kicking down that door, or where do you think he'll end up?
I think it will be Leeds, and it makes a lot of sense. That being said, I'm going to miss Kyle Wagner. I think he's one of my favorite players to watch at MLS, and it makes sense for him to make this move now, but I will genuinely miss his presence.
I agree. I think he's been a great player, and obviously he's been a big part of the Philly Union being who they are. I don't think it's guaranteed Leeds because they waited so long. I mean, the guy's going to end with 17 assists in MLS and win the Supporters Shield and potentially play an MLS Cup. Like, he's on every radar.
DG,
now.
every pseudo Reddit post I've seen though is linking him clearly to Leeds, so that has to be true.
I don't disagree. There's a link, but it was, Leeds was there first, and maybe Jesse Marsh knew about him, or, Brendan Aronson tipped the cap, whatever it was. Clearly they're focused on the American MLS market, but now he is so big, I think he'll win Defender of the Year, that like everyone else is going to be like, oh, whoa, here's a really cheap, high-level defender. And so I think other teams will be in for it now.
And last but not least, I just want to know your, with 2 games remaining, Golden Boot predictions. Is it Mukhtar's to win it, or do you think Driussi is going to come in and nip it in the butt in the last? David, you go first.
I think it is going to be an upset of Daniel Gazdag pouring on 6 more goals and winning on 25 goals ahead of Mukhtar and Driussi.
I desperately want Hani Mukhtar to win this, so I'm going to stick with the lead leader and also shout out Sebastian Driussi for his incredible season. But I'm a Hani Hive person, so I'm backing him.
And with that comes his an MVP trophy as well.
I look at what Austin has become or what they're doing and have a hard time voting against Driussi, but I also feel like Nashville deserves equal plaudits, even though I think it's way less exhilarating how their season has been compared to Austin. So I think if it's like the show me factor, I want to lean Driussi.
Let me ask you guys this. Completely unrelated. So right now I'm gonna put the mark at Chicharito. 2 games left. Chicharito's on 17 goals. Ferreira's on 18, Gazdag on 19, Driussi on 21, Mukhtar on 23. There's a chance all of those players, all 5, either tie or better 19 goals, which is what Tati won Golden Boot with last year.
That's wild.
Does it in any way change your perception of Tati thinking about it that way?
I'm going to say no, because I also kind of what I was thinking with Driussi. It's like that New York City FC team was a revelation, and the way they played was full of vigor and verve, and Tati was obviously a big part of that. And I think just because he maybe didn't equal 23 or 24 or 25, he was still a special player.
Yeah, I agree. And then the fact that like he started off and he still is like sitting in the top 15 list with 13 goals this season and 17. I think that he was on that pace to probably be in the 23, 25 mark. So I don't think it does. And once again, I know that this is a constant narrative, but last year was a completely, like, the last few years in Major League Soccer have been so weird in regards to COVID that it's really tough to go apples and apples with a season like last and then the season now. So my answer is no, it doesn't change anything. And that's the headlines for Major League Soccer this week.
Thank you, Sean. When we come back to wrap up AFP, it's the mailbag. Hope you enjoyed.
And welcome back. It's now time for Ask AFP, where Devang and David will do their best to answer all your questions. Thanks to everyone who sent in their questions via Discord as well as Twitter. First, there was a conversation that happened on our Discord over the last couple days regarding a post that Sebastian Giovinco made on his Instagram page, basically going against what the Toronto Sun suggested, that he is now retired. So Giovinco then came out and said that he's not retired and still wants to play with Toronto FC for next season. Are you guys done with this saga? It seemed like our Discord was just ready to move on, but are you ready to turn away from Sebastian Giovinco and Toronto FC?
Never. But this feels bad and a bit sad. I think clearly, if TFC wanted to sign Seba, they would have. And I think there's some disconnect in this regard, and it feels weird to have a club legend be not desperate, but it seems a bit desperate, and I don't love this vibe at all.
I think that's interesting. I get that. I just think he's now gone around the world. Clearly, he wants to live in Toronto. So if he's going to play soccer, he's either playing for TFC, York United, or Guelph. Did I get that right?
Nailed it. Good work.
It. And is that even in Ontario?
It is.
Yeah, it's in Ontario.
I don't understand.
Okay.
I don't understand how Guelph to you was an interesting pronunciation. By the way, David, like it sounds like how it's spelled.
I annihilated it the first time I did it when they played in Canadian Championship. I did on MLS Today, and I was like, Cupola is playing tonight. Like, it was so bad. You guys be so proud of me. My wife was looking on a vacation because we have free points on WestJet and Porter. She was looking to go to St. John's.
Oh, yes.
Newfoundland, and I was like, that would take a really long time to get to. And she's like, no, it's not that far. I was like, I guarantee you that's like a double transfer flight. And I was right. So
yeah,
Canadian knowledge. But so I think that's probably more what it comes to. And honestly, I mean, he'll be sort of not like for like, but Insigne won't play all the time. Bernadeschi won't. I'm sure they'll all be great friends and hang out. So I could see it for a vet minimum, but that's it.
I'm curious if you guys, and this is me just spitballing here, but I don't know if you read that Josie Altidore interview in The Athletic about the end of TFC times. I wonder if Seba has a similar feeling about who's still there or why maybe he hasn't been welcomed back.
Do you? Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, then I would not do it, obviously.
Right.
I think Josie, just being the personality he was and a bit more vocal of a leader than Giovinco, I think he felt different things about what he was talking about, and it would be harder for him to come back, where Giovinco doesn't seem like he is saying everything he thinks, right? And getting in fights with people about stuff that doesn't involve him. I mean, Josie almost left the club because Giovinco's trainer got fired, not even his trainer.
I think what finally needs to come to the end is Giovinco needs to state, and this is sort of where the gray period is, of what he wants from Toronto FC. Because like a year ago, the conversation was he wanted a designated player spot. He wanted at least max TAM. And like that was where TFC was like, no. And that was sort of where their saving grace to a lot of fans were like, no, we can't afford that. But if he said he'd come out and play for $100K and you know that once again, like no disrespect to any of these players, but that like instead of playing the 19th or the 28th man on the roster, like this team lacked so much depth this year, and if you can get a guy that can come in for 15 minutes and set up somebody or set somebody into, then that would be silly to say no to, especially somebody with a club legend that's probably going to sell more jerseys, et cetera. But my guess is that there's a disconnect in what his value is, and that's where there's the issue.
And I think that speaks to what Devang's saying of like the sort of sad nature of it, of like if he thinks he's going to come back and be the savior who flies to Italy for a friendly and then gets off the plane and scores the goal of the year still, then his lack of perception of who he is unfortunate.
I don't think he has. Yeah. I don't think that's the case though. I think there's some wounded egos that have not been addressed.
Fair.
That was
fair
ominous.
Enough.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Would you like to go into depth, or would you like to leave it there?
I think we could leave it there. I think it's interesting though that there is a massive gap. I think
Brian Windhorst over here.
I'm putting both my fingers in the air as I say. There's got to be something more
moving
to
on
this.
then.
Yeah.
moving on, Tim B asks, who do you think is going to win MLS Next Pro this season? We got the final four of Columbus, TFC, St. Louis, and Tacoma. David, who do you got?
So to be clear, I haven't watched the MLS Next Pro game in 3 months. So does that really upset you?
As somebody who watched TFC destroy the Philadelphia Union this past week. Let's go. Yes, but no. Obviously, I've only watched a handful of Next Pro this year.
But I do know that Columbus is the best team in literally every category.
Yeah.
So I feel like the safe money is to pick Columbus.
I will say, as someone who was around the TFCT crew when I worked at the club, and now is far away, but also loving what these people do behind the scenes. It's been really cool to see TFC2 kind of break through, and I think Hugo Mbonge and scoring that massive goal, they needed some success. And I think the pathway stuff that we've been preaching about and talking about for years is paying fruition. And I mean, Jordan Peruzza is playing on this team as well. I think we were quite negative about the youngsters on TFC, the first team this year, but the fact that this team now, in terms of TFC2, is making inroads and making these deep runs is really cool to see.
Yeah, and shout out to Gianni Samini, who was similar, we talk about pathways for players, but he's a guy that's been an OG at the academy and finally got his opportunity and is the one that actually has the ability to see this TFC 2 team make the playoffs, do things that they've never done. So shout outs to him.
As someone who then has watched a little of MLS Next Pro, if you could change it in any way for next year, how would you change it? Or what would you want to see change, if anything?
I think I would. I don't know. It's tough because there's part of me that's I would like to have a lot more back and forth options. There is options to come back and play, but you've got so many guys that don't get featured for your first team to come back and play and get meaningful minutes. But at the same time, then you're stunting the growth of the 17 to 19-year-olds. So it's a tough one. So I don't know, especially seeing a team like Columbus who put a specific focus on what they were going to do and create that pathway. I don't know if you want to change it, and if it's more just you need the teams to catch up to where Columbus is right now.
I think I wouldn't do playoffs. I would do the winner of the league table is the best.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that would be my only thing, because also it's a lot of travel. I'm looking at the map right now of where these teams are based. It's a pretty Herculean feat to make it through a regular season. So I kind of like the Supporter Shield. I feel like being anointed as a champion after running through this slog is worth it as well.
Do you have any thoughts on that one, David?
I do not. I was just proposing it for the group. I thought it was a good group assignment, and I thought we all got an A.
Thank you for the A. I haven't got one of those.
You guys are Canadian, so I'm sure you don't do grades. So I think we all got a job well done, chap.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
And then moving on, Ronnie asks, if you could remove one team from Canada and USA's World Cup groups, who would you remove and who would you replace? You have to replace them with somebody who is in the same pot. So say Croatia.
I'll go first. I got this. Sean?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm removing Belgium. And I'm putting England.
Okay.
I want England. I want to mess up Eric Dyer in a big game, and I want Alphonso Davies to dunk on him, literally.
I respect that. I also think you have a legitimate. I couldn't remove England because I think they're, except for Qatar, which I'm not going to do that because that feels too easy. They're the worst team probably in pot one, so I wouldn't take any of those other teams as a USA fan. And if you'd asked me this question 4.5 hours ago, I would have hands down said Saudi Arabia. I would have sprinted to the tour to answer that, which feels a little less true now. So I would say for Canada, I'd take out Morocco for sure, and I would add in Tunisia.
Okay, yeah,
but that would be the only one. Maybe South Korea, but I wouldn't add Serbia. I wouldn't add Japan. I definitely wouldn't add Senegal. And maybe I'd add Iran in place of Morocco if I was Canada. And then in pot 4 for the U.S., because I wouldn't take away, obviously I wouldn't take away Wales. Or sorry, who do we play again in the World Cup? Jesus.
Wales and Iran.
I wouldn't take Iran away. I wouldn't take Wales away. We can't have Costa Rica. Whoa. I guess I would say still Saudi Arabia or potentially Ghana instead of Wales.
I'm disgusted by how good your group jaw is, by the way. Good Lord.
Yeah. No, genuinely. Now, oh man, I wish we could be the underdogs in every game. Like, wouldn't that be so cool? Yeah. Oh, wouldn't it be great that way? But yeah, no, we got pretty lucky. And we don't normally. We're normally Canada, to be clear. 2014, we had Brazil. We had Germany, Portugal, and Ghana. And 2010,
that group was easy.
Not that hard.
Come on, that group.
Yeah,
was
we
nothing.
won it.
Yeah,
we won. And then 2006, we had a tough group as well. We had Ghana, we had Czech Republic, who was top 2 in the world at the time, and we had Italy, who won the World Cup. So we deserve it.
Fair enough. Last one, easy one, a very easy one. We got Jose for Life asking, love it or hate it? Jose Mourinho in the Stormzy video.
I loved it. I honestly, I think SK, how much I loathe Jose Mourinho, but the video was great. I'm a big Stormzy fan as well, and I don't think we align on our club team support, but I do think Jose is now just relishing the fact that he's a banter manager, and that's fine. It's perfectly fine.
Jose is also one of those people where, I think everyone has a reason to hate him, right? Because even if you rooted for teams he's coached, you hate him because the way he left or whatever. But there's not a deep-seated problem that he's there's something off field that's wrong with him. He's just a dick in soccer, which I'm fine with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are other coaches or other athletes where you're oh, I don't like that athlete. Also, they did this really bad thing that one time, or they represent this really bad thing. Mourinho's just an ass. And so it's just kind of funny now that, as Devang said, he's sort of he's a meme and he's accepted it. And that's cool.
Yeah, I hate the way he ended his Spurs career. He is a dick. But once again, when he pops up in that video, you just gotta laugh. You gotta love it. It's crazy.
It's banter, and also, football, soccer is a funny thing because now someone I've hated I'm okay, he's kind of cool. He's all right, so it's not too bad. Anything else, folks, before we wrap up? I feel like this was a jam-packed show.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman is coming back to be Wolverine in the next Deadpool, so there's that.
I saw that.
Whoa.
What the hell? Is Ryan Reynolds in that film as well?
Yeah, he's Deadpool. So
thanks. Okay.
That's the soccer connection, the Wrexham thing.
Good to know.
Yes.
Wrexham's like the Guelph of England.
Wrexham's not even in England. It's in Wales, isn't
Wales.
it?
Wow.
Is it?
He's really...
Yes.
David has shit on Wales a lot on this episode, so I really hope that there's...
I don't acknowledge Wales as a country, so come prove it to me.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's AFP. If you could give us a rating or a review wherever you get this podcast, that would be incredible. We're also on Twitter @afootballpod, as well as on patreon.com/afootballpodcast. As always, thank you to Greg on the ones and twos, and for Zach. Welcome, sir. Happy to have you. And Sean and David, thank you so much for listening to AFP. We'll talk to you next week.